Good morning, brothers and sisters. I want to talk to you this morning about hope and its pivotal role in the Black experience in the past and our need for it today. Our message this morning is entitled, Hope is the Fruit of the Spirit. Hope is the fruit of the Spirit. Our scripture comes from the book of Romans, chapter 15, verse 13. May the God of hope fill you so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. This is the second Sunday in Advent. Advent is the 40-day period before Christmas. Advent means coming. It is a period of preparation, expectation, and anticipation for divine intervention. Divine intervention is when God becomes active and involved in our circumstances, when God breaks into history. Now, most of us were introduced to Advent through the traditional church, through traditional Christianity. And it holds that Advent is about a singular event that occurred 2,000 years ago as the biblical nation Israel awaited divine intervention in the form of Jesus. So today, Christians observe Advent as an annual commemoration of this unique, momentous, once in history event that split time into BC and AD. This is European Christianity. Our African ancestors who created religion had a different understanding. They did not limit divine intervention to a one-time event 2,000 years ago. They believed that all religion is about divine intervention, from the simplest prayer to the most stupendous miracle. And all of religion is about making spiritual power a real and active force in our daily lives. But our ancestors didn't think of this intervention as especially miraculous. It was a normal and natural part of life. They believed it, expected it, they welcomed it, they depended upon it. So, quite naturally, during times of trouble or times of crisis and times of danger, they believed they could call on God and God would intervene. This intervention came in many forms. It may show up as healing or inspiration or determination or encouragement. It may show up as insight or ingenuity or revelations. This intervention would enable them to solve their problems, overcome their challenges, and change their circumstances. They had rituals where the cosmic power of God would break in and be experienced by everyone. And they would thank God for this divine intervention, this regular, normal, and natural interaction with the spiritual world over 1,000,000 years is the basis of African people's profound spirituality, no matter where they may be in the world today. When we were snatched from our motherland Africa and brought to these alien shores naked and in chains, we gradually lost the particulars of our ancestral religion, but we didn't lose the deep spirituality that had been developing in us since before the dawn of recorded history. We didn't lose our familiarity, our sensitivity, our affinity for the things of the Spirit. We didn't lose our openness and expectation of spiritual experiences where God was active in our earthly affairs. We still lived in a world where spiritual experiences were common and spiritual influences were alive. Hence, no matter what our circumstance might be, we had hope. We believed that what was to come would be better than what's been. Our ancestors survived the horrors of slavery, the womb to tomb life of backbreaking labor, physical and psychological torture, and barbarous cruelty because they had hope. The author Ta-Nehisi Coates says, an enslaved person just before the time of the founding of America could look back 100 years and see nothing but slavery, and could look ahead 100 years and see nothing but slavery to come. Lord have mercy. They seemingly had nothing to live for. But suicide was more common among masters than it was among slaves because we had hope. They survived a system designed to kill the mind, use up the body, and torture the soul because they had the expectation that what's to come will be better than what's been. And I'm here to tell you, if they didn't believe it then, we wouldn't be here now. You see, it's our spirituality gave us hope, and hope gave us a resilience that the world had never seen. When we lost the last vestiges of our African religion, we adopted Christianity, but we infused it with a spirituality that European Christianity had never seen. And it was transformed into something else, something it had not been before we took hold of it. We infused elements of African ritual, rhythm, worship, and energy that gave Black Christianity life. And that life gave us hope. It gave us the feeling that we were not alone, that there was more to the world than we could see, that there was a power in the universe beyond the power of our oppressor. It gave us hope. And if they didn't have hope then, we wouldn't be here now. In a world full of endless suffering, unbearable pain, and constant heartbreak, we found divine intervention in the promise of heaven, and it gave us hope. Old time Black preachers preached unlike anyone had ever preached before. Those preachers instinctively harked back to the African call and response rituals and turned preaching into a sacred art form that gave us hope, that conveyed inspiration, that lifted depression, that healed despair, that brought us back from the brink of suicide. They talked about heaven with such vividness and clarity that it made you feel like they had just come back from there on the last flight. They made you feel heaven. They made you smell it. They made you see it. They made it so real that it's as if you were looking through a glass door. And you may say today, man, I'm educated. I don't believe in that backwoods stuff. But I'm telling you, if they hadn't believed it then, we wouldn't be here now. The period of the civil rights struggle is called a time of rising expectations. That means a time in which we had hope. We expected change. We expected divine intervention. The civil rights struggle was a spiritual struggle. It was centered in churches and led by ministers who believed they were doing God's work. Black people were motivated by an overwhelming sense of being involved in a spiritual movement. Spirituality was the driving force in our efforts, and it gave us hope. Everybody from Nat Turner to Frederick Douglass to Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X to Martin Luther King to Jaramogi Baby Agyeman was driven by a sense of spiritual mission. Struggle is spiritual activity, and it gave us hope. Our spirituality has always been our hope in a time of trouble, and we're going to need it because we're in a time of trouble now. There's an old saying in America, when white people get a cold, Black people get pneumonia. Well, white people are not feeling too good today, and they got way more than a cold. They are having a nervous breakdown over the perceived threat to white supremacy. They're having a nervous breakdown over the demographic shift that is making America darker, younger, and more diverse. They're having a nervous breakdown because they fear they are losing their country. And they're self-medicating on opioids, creating an opioid epidemic that is their number one cause of death, killing more people annually than cancer and car accidents combined. The phenomenon now known as deaths of despair is sweeping across white America. They are dying not just from drug addiction, but from alcoholism, suicide, and curable diseases at an alarming rate. Scientists have recently determined that they are actually dying from broken hearts. Broken hearts due to the perceived end of white supremacy, white domination, white privilege. And when you add the brutal toll of COVID trauma, you have a recipe for disaster. Now, angry and afraid and insecure white people are acting out in ugly and insane ways to vent their anger, rage, fear, and frustration, shooting innocent people at work, on the roads, in schools, at church, or while taking a job. White racism and hatred are no longer veiled in disguise. It is open and out front, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. These factors are creating a volatile America. more volatile than we have known in quite some time. These white nationalists have just begun to fight. They're used to winning within the system. But if they can't win according to the rules, they have violent plan Bs, diabolical plan Cs, and unthinkable plan Ds. The last time they felt that white supremacy was seriously threatened in the late 1960s, they flooded our community with drugs, killed and imprisoned our leaders, and gave the police qualified immunity or a license to kill. The recent acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse has already sent the message that white vigilantes have a license to kill, and it is open season on peaceful protesters. It's going to get worse before it gets better. We're all dancing on top of a volcano. Remember, when white people get a cold, black people get pneumonia. And white people's existential crisis is creating problems for us. We have had our own reaction to crazy white people, social conflict, political polarization, and COVID trauma. Since 2013, 10,000 black people have been murdered by the police. That is a higher death rate than at the height of the lynching era. Black people were disproportionately affected by COVID deaths. Black people's death rate was twice that of any other demographic. The constant trauma of loss has affected us all. The toll of the times can be seen in the sharp rise in the levels of domestic violence, child abuse, homicide, and crime. A CDC study from August of 2020 reported that in June of that year, more than 1/4 of black young adults had contemplated suicide in the last 30 days. 1/4 of young black people had contemplated suicide in a 30-day period. 1 out of 4. The study said the staggering number of vulnerable people dying from COVID, the open expressions of racial animus, the televised killings of unarmed black people, and the hostility toward policies that would benefit black people leads young black people to the conclusion that there is a lack of compassion and care for young black lives, which fuels feelings of hopelessness. This absence of hope leaves them psychologically frail and fragile, unable to withstand the tests of the times. The question before us is, why are we succumbing today when we have been through far worse times and conditions? The conditions we live in today are nothing like the horrors of slavery, the terror of Jim Crow, or the crippling limitations of institutional racism. Our lives today are far easier and provide more opportunity than any previous generation of black people. Why is this generation succumbing to the stress of black life in America? How is it that suicide is more prevalent today than it was during slavery? How is it that depression and anxiety and other mental and emotional disorders are greater today than ever? How is it that young black people are struggling with hope? I believe that these things are evidence of a spiritual problem. Hope is a fruit of the Spirit. Black people born after the civil rights struggle do not feel the same urgent need for divine intervention. Young black people have rejected the church, and for good reason. But many people have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. They have ignored the needs of the Spirit altogether. We know that human beings are comprised of mind, body, and spirit. We know we need food to nourish the body. We need knowledge to nourish the mind. But how do we nourish the spirit? Partying won't feed the spirit. Football won't feed the spirit. Money won't feed the spirit. Success won't feed the spirit. Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok won't feed the spirit. Without spiritual nourishment, we suffer from spiritual starvation. This starvation is felt as a great longing, a deep yearning of the soul that nothing seems to satisfy. Spiritual starvation is a non-specific pain, an absence that motivates all we do, even though we are not conscious of why we are doing it. Spiritual starvation makes itself felt in our addictions, obsessions, and compulsions. Spiritual starvation makes itself felt in our vague unhappiness, our nagging lack of fulfillment, and the general restlessness that is our constant companion. This spiritual starvation expresses itself in feelings of inadequacy, frustration, anxiety, and fear that we can't seem to shake off. This spiritual hunger makes itself known in the profound insecurity and lack of confidence we feel about our future, a loss of hope. A few weeks ago, Dr. Jawanza talked about a growing trend in Black academia, Afro-pessimism. It basically means that in this world of racism and white supremacy, Black people can't win no matter what we do. Afro-pessimism is evidence of a spiritual problem, evidence of a generation that is losing hope. What have we done wrong? What did previous generations know that we seem to have forgotten? Could it be that our dependence upon God and regular divine intervention is more than superstition or the projection of an unsophisticated mind? Does confidence in God give us hope even in the worst of times? Well, Harvard did an extensive 5-year study on the question. They sought to measure the effect of regular spiritual activity on the quality of human life. What they found was quite revealing. They found that regular participation in spiritual activity that includes worship, prayer, meditation, fellowship, social activism, volunteer service, and charity, which would include struggling, made people better. It didn't just make them feel better. It did. But they became measurably better in every sense of the word. If they were sick, they became less sick or healed altogether. If they were old, they were less affected by problems of old age and they lived longer. If they were addicted to drugs or alcohol or other forms of destructive activity, they were more likely to overcome their addiction and to avoid it in the future. They found out that faith-based recovery programs had a power and effectiveness that could not be matched by programs with no spiritual component. If their mind was unstable, it became more stable. They found that every disease and human affliction was affected positively by the regular outreach of the soul. They found out the absence of spiritual activity both shortens your life and reduces your quality of life. People were happier, healthier, more satisfied, more patient, more optimistic, more enthusiastic, more authentic, more empathetic, more compassionate, and more hopeful with spiritual activity. They felt connected to something bigger and more important than themselves. And as a result, they were more concerned about their families, their community, society in general, and even future generations. The researchers concluded the best we can tell is that something is going on in worship and spiritual activity that we can't determine. It is something that is very subtle. The best we can explain it, just as plants need regular exposure to the sun to flourish, human beings need regular exposure to God to flourish. What they found out through an extensive, exhaustive, time-consuming 5-year study is something our ancestors knew already. We need divine intervention on a regular basis. You know, back in the pre-COVID days when I was traveling on a regular basis, I was in a hotel one night channel surfing. The remote had no guide, so I had to manually go from channel to channel to figure out what was on. While searching, I came across this program on shipbuilding. Now, I don't know why I stopped there. I don't know why I found this old man building sailboats interesting. But I remember him saying that he had rebuilt boats that had been as much as 300 years old. He said he could tell if a boat was any good, if it was salvageable, by looking at the place where the mast, the long pole that the sail hangs from, is joined to the center of the ship. The place where these two meet in the middle of the boat is called the tabernacle. He said the tabernacle is the core, the soul of the ship. It is the state of the tabernacle that determines the integrity of the ship. It doesn't matter how much money you spend making the ship strong or beautiful in other areas. If the tabernacle is compromised, the ship's integrity is compromised. If the tabernacle is not strong, its performance will be lackluster. If the tabernacle is not intact, its life will be limited. As long as the tabernacle is strong, the ship can withstand the stresses of the sea. As long as the tabernacle is strong, the ship can survive the winds of the storm. As long as the tabernacle is strong, the ship can be beaten and battered by the waves of the ocean and come out all right. As long as the tabernacle is strong, the ship can even sink to the bottom of the waters and stay there for years and still be raised up and restored. You know, I figured out later on why that TV program caught my attention. I figured out what God was trying to tell me that night. The old man was talking about shipbuilding, but there was a message in there for an old preacher concerned with people building. In the Bible, the tabernacle is the holy place in the temple where God dwells within. Our spirit, our soul, our inner divinity is our tabernacle. It is the core, the essence of me and you. It is the state of the tabernacle that determines the quality of our lives. It doesn't make a difference how much time or money you spend on the other areas. It doesn't make a difference how hard we try to make ourselves strong or competent or skilled in other areas. It doesn't make a difference how much money we spend on how we look or how we talk or how we smell. If our tabernacle is not right, we are not right. Our muscles can have muscles, but if our tabernacle is not right, we are not right. We can have 5 PhDs, but if our tabernacle is not right, we are not right. If our tabernacle is not right, our integrity is compromised. If our tabernacle is not right, we cannot withstand the stresses and pressures and challenges of life. If our tabernacle is not right, when the storms of life are raging, when the wind blows and the rain falls, we crack under the pressure. If our tabernacle is not right, when we are beaten and battered by the vicissitudes of life, we falter and fail. But when our tabernacle is strong, we are strong. When our tabernacle is strong, we are like a tree planted by the river. When our tabernacle is strong, we can face the future with confidence because we have hope. And just as long as the tabernacle is strong in a boat, the ship can harness the power of the wind to reach its destination. When our tabernacle is strong, we can harness the power of God to receive new strength for our earthly battles. Hope is the fruit of the Spirit. Hope is the conviction that what's to come is better than what's been. Hope gives people the inspiration to continue fighting and believing that their circumstances will improve. Hope has been the key to Black people's survival over the last 400 years. Hope has sustained us. Without hope, we are dead in the water. We can't struggle without hope. And in times like these, we're going to have to struggle or we're going to die. Hope comes from confidence in God. Confidence in God comes from our familiarity with the things of the Spirit. Hope is a fruit of the Spirit. We are an African people. Spirituality is our superpower. But what good is a superpower if we don't use it? Fighting injustice and oppression and exploitation is spiritual work. God is the power that gives us life. God is the inspiration that guides our step. God is the source of the inner dignity that will not permit us to accept injustice. God is the source of the rage of the powerless when they struggle to be free. God is the source that gives us strength, encouragement, and determination. God is the source that gives us dreams and insights and revelations. If we make ourselves available, God intervenes in the world through us. If we make ourselves available, God shows up in the world as you and me. If we make ourselves available, we can become the messiahs the world needs today. And if we make ourselves available to God, we can be confident that what's to come will be better than what's been. In the Pan African Orthodox Christian Church, we are rooted in African spiritual science. Our best self theology prepares us physically, mentally, and spiritually to withstand the rigor of fighting injustice, oppression, and exploitation of African people everywhere. If you want to join our ongoing Pan African Best Self Black Self Determination movement, we invite you to join us. Make yourself available and let's do God's work together. Amen and Ashe.